Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coffee and Real Estate November edition. I hope you've all had a great month since the last time we spoke. Interesting things have happened since the last time we were together. The prime interest rate was dropped to 0.5 point, I know, early in November, so we've got that going for us. And it just reminded us that mortgage rates do not directly relate to the prime lending rate, since it went down a little bit and then went back up a little bit, even though prime rates were down. This may be the very first Coffee and Real Estate live chat where I don't have coffee. And how many years have I been doing this? Just not feeling like coffee this morning. I know that sounds like some sort of brain damage has set in, but that is what it is. Now, as usual, we're here to talk real estate. We're going to talk about what the numbers were over the last month. But of course, the pre-show is for us to just sort of, well, for me to make sure that the stream is working, but also to talk about anything you might want to bring up. If somebody wants to ask a question about maybe something that's not even specifically real estate related or something real estate adjacent, this is the time to do it. I'm going to just make sure we're live on all the usual places. You might want to bring up. Yeah, there we go. That's YouTube. We're up on YouTube. Let's see how we're looking on LinkedIn. Well, it's not there. Getting a weird loading thing here on LinkedIn. Yeah, I've got no idea why that's acting weird. Well, I don't see it. Well, no, there it is. There's a link to it. But it says it's not going, so I don't know. We'll have to see. I know I had to log back in to LinkedIn for the service I use that streams it, so maybe it won't go to LinkedIn today. Checking it out on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Chat is up, so feel free to ping me with any questions or comments you might have. Yep, it's showing me live on X. Great. So we'll have to see how things go on LinkedIn. The service seems to think that I'm up on LinkedIn, but apparently I'm not. We've got about 11 minutes until we're going to kick off the official show, so feel free to reach out via, if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, I believe that I should see your comments. For those of you who are not on either one of those, if you're on something else, you can see what is asked actually on the screen. You can see, like, right there, you can see the timer that's counting down to the start of the show. When we're actually in the show, you'll see a scroll that'll show comments and questions. So it's just another way for you to sort of get a view of that. But of course, if you want to ask a question, I'll repeat it before I answer it so that we can be clear on what's going on. I did do a real estate trip to Carson City and Minden last weekend. Checked out home prices, looked at a ton of it, and spread it out on different A, B, and C category homes. I don't do D category home investing, so I didn't really go anywhere along those lines. Although I really didn't see any neighborhoods that I would classify as D quality neighborhoods or homes or properties in Carson City. I've heard they exist in Reno. but I haven't gone to Reno yet. Reno's kind of on the list for me to go and check out. But man, the Carson Valley is very nice, particularly the western Carson Valley. I'm very much enjoying that part of the state. And not just because it'll cost me 14% less to live there. So I'm looking for investments right now. As some of you know, I used to be very invested in Hawaii, particularly on the island of Oahu. And I have since divested all of that money. Hawaii, particularly Oahu, were just too anti-property rights, anti-landlord, anti-short-term rental. I mean, very much into dictating what you can and can't do with your property. So I decided to divest. That turned out to be a pretty good call. I literally probably made the most. If I was going to sell my property in 2024, the time that I did it is probably the best time I could have done it. I'm now seeing properties similar to mine selling for less. So, and I know an awful lot of folks in the area where I was were in the same boat as I was, that it was just becoming sort of ridiculous in terms of, you just couldn't tell what was going to happen next in terms of what the county was going to make illegal for homeowners who were trying to do short-term rentals on their properties. Boy, there was a really sad story last year where someone had just bought the building where my condo was in Hawaii. It's called Pat's at Punaluu. And someone had bought there, and literally the following month, the state had come out and said, you can't do short-term rentals anymore unless you have this magic number, and you've been approved by the state to do it. And for anybody who continues to do it, the fee is going to be, I think it was something crazy. For every day that they discover you advertising a short-term rental online, there was going to be like $10,000 a day. So it was some ridiculous, kind of obviously heavy-handed response to that. Super tired today. Not feeling 100%. Not sure what that's about. Maybe it was the extended trip last weekend. I didn't just do last weekend, so I went up there on Friday. And I came back on Tuesday just so I could get a few what are days, normal working days, to get more ground truth in Carson City and Minden. And as someone who has grown up in the Bay Area, I was born in San Francisco, raised in Santa Clara County, went to San Jose State, went to Lynbrook High School. Traffic is oxygen. It's there. It's always there here, right? And I think at the peak, at the peak, it was next to nothing. So I kept timing my day. Well, gosh, if I got to go across town, if I got to go from Carson City East to Carson City West, because I was looking at some properties. There's some lovely elevated properties on the eastern side of Carson City that get a great view of the valley. So I wanted to check those out. It was absolutely no traffic. So it was kind of amazing. And I would imagine there would be less traffic now at this time of year. I don't know how popular Carson City is. I realize that gambling is legal and the casino thing is real in Carson City. Totally not my speed. I'm not much of a casino guy. But it was just interesting to see. And the good news was it's not, well, I guess it's not for Vegas. I mean, if you live in Vegas, the Strip is very different from living somewhere else in Vegas. I've have quite a few clients who've moved to Vegas and love it and never interact with the downtown area. And I guess that's the same in most towns where that's true. But in Carson City, things are sort of just spread around. There's not this area of the city is all the casinos. It's kind of spread around. Some of the bigger hotels will have a casino built into it. The big casino seems to be a place called Bodine's, which is in the south end of Carson City. But really, and this is something that's really something that appeals to me, is Carson City absolutely has a kind of a historical vibe to it, an Old West vibe to it once you get downtown. And I'd love to own one of the old 100+ year commercial buildings downtown. They've got so much style compared to the antiseptic boxes that we sort of drop for commercial properties here. We're about 5 minutes away from starting the show off officially, folks. If anyone has a question, please feel free to drop it into the chat. I'll be happy to try to answer it for you. Of course, I always encourage folks to ask their questions during the show. But if simply so everyone can benefit at the time, one thing that does tend to happen is these shows, obviously, once I've done them, they're available for playback. So what I'll see is during the week following, I'll get an awful lot of folks who've watched it, and then I'll get questions from them as a result of that. And frequently they'll just reach out to me directly. And the downside to that, while I want to answer your questions, I want to help you achieve your goals. You know, it's always more powerful when everybody hears the answer. So I'd love for you to go ahead and throw those questions in as we're talking live. But if you can't, of course, feel free to follow up after the show. And maybe one of these days I'll come up with a good system to remember the questions I got since the last show so I can share them on the next show. But I'd love for this to have as much impact as possible for as many people as possible. And you can help me do that by asking your questions during the live stream. I have had some folks ask because I've now gone to Nevada a couple of times, I've had people ask if I'm looking to move to Nevada. And the answer is yeah, but right now there are several places on my list. Greater Phoenix, north of Phoenix, sort of in the mountain, as it sort of gets towards the mountains. I'm not a huge Phoenix guy. I'd much rather be someplace that maybe has a little bit more of a mountain thing going on. But I've also looked in the hill country of Texas. Did a lot of that on the drive back from taking my son to law school earlier this year. I think I shared that in the last live stream, where my oldest is going to law school, University of Houston. Go Cougars. So yeah, on the way back, I definitely looked at some hill country stuff. Didn't spend a lot of time there. On the way out to Houston, my son and I stopped in, I think it's called Fredericksburg, which is a hill country town. Just beautiful. I mean, I don't think anyone, when they think of Texas, thinks of places like that are super wooded and green and just really amazing places, but they are out there. You just got to go find them. I kind of want to stay further west. I still have family here in California that aren't going to leave if I leave. So being able to come back easily in case I'm needed is a good thing. Just so I can be there when I need to be. Let's see here. We're just a couple of minutes away, 2 minutes away from kicking the show off here at 10 a.m. I want to thank those of you who've taken time out on your valuable Saturday morning time to spend it with me. And I hope it's good information for you. Let me do one more check on LinkedIn and see if it's going or not. Maybe LinkedIn simply won't kick it off until the official time has arrived. I don't know. Yeah, it says wait for the host to start, and the stream has started, so I don't know. We'll see. To be honest, all the comments, I don't think I've ever gotten a question or comment off of the LinkedIn stream. So I'm not sure I'll get terribly preoccupied about that. All right, we are 1 minute away from kicking off the stream. We do have some interesting data this time around that is sort of a 180 from past years, and you'll see it. I'll call it out when it comes up. But it's very interesting. It's a trend that isn't totally universal, but from the big picture, from the county data, which obviously we like to use that as sort of the bigger compass of where things might be going, because the bigger numbers you have in terms of the volume of data, the more accurate it tends to be. If you've got just a handful of transactions, it's a little bit less so, right? It could be subject to just one transaction that was very weird in some way that's throwing the overall data off. But this is a trend that's hard to ignore, that's happening really almost across the entire county. All right. We are just about ready to go. We're about 15 seconds away from starting the show off officially. Again, I once again just want to thank those of you who decided to tune in. And I hope that we're able to give you some really good information that you can use to move forward with your goals. Another thing I'd love to hear, we'll kick off this question after we do the official start. And here we are. It is 10 a.m. Welcome to the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat for November of 2024. My name's Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker and realtor right here in Silicon Valley, based out of Morgan Hill, but I serve most of Santa Clara County. So if you have any real estate goals you'd like me to help you achieve, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to be on your list of go-to professionals when you're looking for someone to help guide you through your next real estate transaction. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com and just click on Contact Robert. You can send me a message. You can call me. All my contact information is right there. So I look forward to hearing from you when I can help you reach your goals. So as I was saying in the pre-show, just before we kicked it off here, and now I can't remember what the heck I was going to say. Well, let's just jump into it. Maybe it'll come back to me or I'll cover it as we go through. We have some interesting numbers this time around as it relates to, and as we always do, we jump in and start with just the raw data, right? That's where I think we can start a good foundation of understanding what's happened since the last time we spoke. And let me go ahead and change to a place with my face that's not so annoying. So here we are. This is the total inventory. So think of this, if you're a seller, think of this as your competition number. How many other homes were you competing with? And if you're a buyer, this is the inventory you had to choose from. This is the total number of homes that were available in October for you to consider for a purchase. Now in Santa Clara County, the number's up 18% from the same time last year. Last year we had 1,348 homes on the market. This year we have 1,587. So a big jump in inventory from last year. In San Jose, it was up 22%, 636 homes last year, 774 homes this year. Morgan Hill, up 48%. And that's an interesting trend in Morgan Hill. We're seeing a lot more homes coming up on the market in Morgan Hill. If the folks I've talked to, in terms of folks who've reached out asking about potentially listing their home for sale, there's an awful lot of, and this is a trend that's been going on for a while now, and I've discussed it here before, an awful lot of folks who are looking to leave, like the state, which is, and I've talked about it before, it used to be about 80% of folks that I would, and I've been doing this since 1988, so I've got a lot of ground knowledge that I've accumulated over the multiple decades. It used to be that about 20% of folks who were selling their home were going to move out of state. And it was usually simply because they were moving to a retirement a community or a city that was more in line with that lifestyle. Now, now 80% are leaving the state. And the reasons usually aren't, we're just looking to go to a retirement place or someplace that caters to more of a retirement lifestyle. These are folks who simply want to leave. They think that things are going in a direction that are not good, and they want to leave. And what's funny is I see upticks a couple of years ago when Sacramento started talking about offering free healthcare to everybody, regardless of citizenship status, all that kind of stuff, and how much that was going to cost. I mean, it would require something like a tripling of taxes in order to cover that bill. I got so many calls after that happened, so it was very much linked to that. But in San Jose, just kind of returning to the inventory numbers here, it's a 22% increase in the same time last year. As I said, 774 homes this year, 636 last year. And then in Morgan Hill, I think the reason I was going into this is there's a definite increase in the number of folks who are looking to move. And I saw that last month in terms of who was calling me, the uptick in inquiries that I got. So it doesn't really surprise me that we've seen an increase in the inventory. We'll see how this pans out with the new listings data, but seeing this isn't horribly surprising to me, but seeing that it's an almost 50% increase from last year is a little bit of a surprise. I expected it to sort of be higher than other communities, but not by this margin, by an increase of 48%. So 83 this year, 56 last year for Morgan Hill. In Gilroy, 74 last year, 91 this year for a 23% increase. So overall, inventory numbers increasing in all markets for the county. Next, let's take a look at new listings. And you'll see the same sort of data is applying here. And again, Morgan Hill is leading the pack in terms of new listings this year. Overall in Santa Clara County, we've got a 26% increase. It's 1,067 last year, 1,340 in October of 2024. San Jose, a 30% increase, 538 homes last year, 702 this year. Again, a 30% increase, 50% increase from October of 2023 to October of 2024 in Morgan Hill, with 38 last year, 57 this year. Gilroy saw a 36% increase in the total number of homes that were listed in the month of October, 45 last year, 61 this year. So the takeaway there is your choices, the competition for you as a seller and the choices for you as a buyer are dramatically increasing compared to the same time last year. And now if we look at the total number of homes that have sold in the month of October compared to the same time last year, and remember, I didn't point this out at the beginning, but right now we're talking about year over year. We're eliminating seasonal trends to try to focus just on what is comparable. So October of this year is absolutely comparable to October of last year. And when it's not, for some odd reason, like interest rates took a dramatic drop like they did in 2022, I'll point those sorts of things out. But, doing this kind of comparison is typically the best way to go. Comparing a February to a January doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or a December to a January doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Those are very different months in terms of what kind of a market we expect to see because of seasonal influences. All right. Total number of homes sold. Now, in Santa Clara County, that number is up 14%. Remember that the total active listings is up 18%. So it's outstripping the homes that are getting sold. 927 homes sold last year, 1,061 homes sold this year. In San Jose, 15% increase, 453 homes last year, 519 homes this year. In Morgan Hill, we saw this number go down. We dropped 26%, 47 homes sold last year, 35 homes sold this year. And in Gilroy, we again saw a decline of 6%, 36 homes sold last year, 34 homes sold this year. So in a time when we're accumulating more and more inventory, you can see that there are some markets where obviously the demand is not enough to chip away at the number of homes that are on the market. Now let's think about this for a second, because another thing I like to look at when we hit this slide is, for each one of these numbers, did we add homes to the overall inventory or did we subtract homes to the overall inventory? In other words, did we sell more homes than we listed in that month? And in this case, we did not do that in any of these areas. So in Santa Clara County overall, we added 279 homes to overall inventory from September to October in terms of homes listed versus homes sold. In San Jose, we added 183 homes to inventory. In Morgan Hill, we added 22 homes, and in Gilroy, we added 27 homes. So across the board for the last few months, we've been doing nothing but adding homes. Now remember, we have had months in the past where we sold more homes than were listed, which simply meant we sold the equivalent number of homes that were listed plus whatever was carrying over in the inventory, which would then result in declines in the overall inventory. And we're just not seeing that right now at all. All right. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at months of inventory. Now, what this number means is if we were to freeze the total inventory right now and the total number of homes that sold in that same month, how long, and those numbers stayed the same for upcoming months, at that sales rate, how long would it take us to sell off the inventory? And we've had some interesting numbers over the past few months, but things have been surprisingly stable in the county overall. 0% change from last year. 1.5 months of inventory, 0% change between October of 2023 and October of 2024. And just to calibrate you to what sort of is the middle point, meaning what's the point at which we switch from being a seller's market to a buyer's market? So right now, obviously, we're in a seller's market based on this number. 4.5 months is considered a balanced market between buyers and sellers nationally, and 4.5 to 5.5 months. Lower on that scale is really where we live. So in my head, I usually think 4.5 months is balanced for our local markets. But again, in Santa Clara County, no change from last year. This year, San Jose was up 7%, so 1.4 to 1.5, which means we were trending, moving away from a seller's market, but still profoundly in a seller's market, right? Anything that's going to be way down here in the 1 point whatever number range is going to be something that's a seller's market. Morgan Hill, dramatic change. 1.2 months last year, 2.4 months this year. Started to see this trend early in 2024 where there was some slowing in the Morgan Hill market. But it's interesting to see us continuing this trend as we move through the rest of the year. Gilroy was up 29%, 2.1 months last year, 2.7 months this year, which really just reflects that Gilroy has really sort of been a less feverish market than these other markets. And that's one reason why I think it's probably been a year now worth of these shows that I've been holding up Gilroy as a great place for buyers who want to get more bang for their buck to consider looking, because this is still a city where you can get some great deals and get a lot more house than you can just to the north in Morgan Hill or San Jose. Okay. Next, let's take a look at the total number of homes pending or contingent. So this is a number we started tracking maybe 4 months ago. And the reason is it's a leading indicator, right, in terms of what's going to happen next month, because these are homes that went into contract in the month of October. So in other words, a buyer submitted an offer and a seller accepted it. That is more or less what's represented here. There's a little bit of variation. Contingent usually is the first stage once a offer has gotten accepted. It's contingent because the buyer has an opportunity to do their due diligence, do some research and inspections. Then it gets moved to pending once the buyer has signed off on all those contingencies. But this is still, I think, a good indicator of things to come for the following month. So in Santa Clara County overall, from the same time last year, 41% increase in the total number of contracts that went pending or contingent. 830 last year, 1,167 this year. And what's also interesting is to see how many of these actually close. Now, it can take more than 30 days for an escrow to close. It can take 45 days, 50, 60 days. So not all of these are going to close in the following month, but a majority of them should. And when you see dramatic changes from one month to the next, meaning we should expect to see about 1,000 closings next month. If you see far fewer than that, that usually indicates that we're seeing some sort of problem in the escrow process. So, and the thing that tends to be the problem is financing falls through. That's really the number one reason why escrows fail to close right now. Now in San Jose, we saw a 35% increase in the number of homes that went pending or contingent, 414 last year in October of 2023, 560 this year in October of 2024. Morgan Hill only up 17%, 36 last year, 42 this year. And in Gilroy, 33 last year, 50 this year for a 52% increase. Next, let's talk about average original list price. Now, again, for those of you who are new to the show, this is a number you've probably not seen before from other agents. And I don't know why, but I think it's a great way to get a look into the psychology of the seller as they enter the market, because what this is the original list price, meaning when that agent sat down with that seller in their living room and they agreed on a opening price that the home should be sold for or listed for in the MLS, this was the number that they chose, or the average number that they chose. And it gives us an opportunity to see, well, where were seller expectations? How much more than last year do they expect to get for their home? And then we can look at what homes actually sold for in that month and see, are expectations disconnected from the reality of what homes are selling for, right? So it's a great way to get a little insight into that and to get an idea of how above reality are current seller expectations, or how much below our current seller expectations. So as we keep that in mind and look at these numbers, we can see that from the same time last year, Santa Clara County saw on average that original list price being 3.2% higher. So last year it was $1,805,624. This year, $1,863,160. San Jose saw a 9.7% increase, $1,365,976 last year, $1,498,332 this year. Morgan Hill, $1,755,193 last year, $1,508,697, which is a 14% decrease. It's also important to note that in a market like Morgan Hill or Gilroy, where there's far fewer instances, right, of homes happening in that market, one really big or low number can definitely push this one way or another. And last year in October, we did have a home that I think was in the $4 million range that was listed. So that I think that pushed it up a little bit. But I think when I did the math at the time, this number was still it was only a little bit less. So I still think it's a valid indicator to indicate that opinions on what my home is worth in Morgan Hill are more in line with what the market is doing this year than they have been in previous years. Because if you'll remember, we've had months where the Morgan Hill selling market expected to get 10, 15, 18% more for their home than they did the year before. So seeing this is actually a little bit encouraging. And we'll see how this pans out as we reach the end of the year. But I think the realization of what the market's really doing is sinking in a little bit more in Morgan Hill than it has in past months. In Gilroy, we saw a 9.2% increase, 1,154,226 last year, 1,260,851 this year. So expectations are definitely higher in Gilroy, to the tune of 9.2%. But I think as we'll look at some of these upcoming numbers, that there may be a reality check that needs to happen. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the average sales price of homes. And we'll get an idea of how much above or below expectations these homes are falling. And I called out Gilroy specifically in this case because it is an outlier as it relates to what expectations were. Now, in Santa Clara County last year, homes sold, the average price of a whole home sold was $1,835,077. This year, $1,999,048 for an 8.9% increase. And remember, this is what they actually sold for. So this is a definite stick in the ground. This isn't the opinion of what sellers think their home is worth. This is what buyers ended up paying. Just the property taxes. Just the property taxes make my eyes bleed when I think about how much some of these folks are going to be paying. San Jose, $1,465,381 last year, $1,534,199 this year. That's a 4.7% increase, and that's actually a pretty low increase compared to past months where we've seen double-digit increases in San Jose. Morgan Hill was up 4.3%, $1,563,097 last year, $1,630,190 this year. And Gilroy, with the smallest increase in the same time last year, $1,099,129 last year, $1,135,044 this year for a 3.3% increase. Now let's stop and pause for a second and calibrate with this number what seller expectations were in the month of October. So as we look at Santa Clara County overall, we saw that the original list price, what sellers were hoping and expecting to get for their home, was $1,863,160, which is below this sales price. So that means that on average, sellers were getting $135,888 above expectations when they sold their home. In San Jose, that number was $35,867 was how much they were tending to get above expectations for the month of October. Morgan Hill, $121,493 over original list price, or what the sellers were expecting to get. Gilroy, and this is something that happens in Gilroy on a pretty regular basis. It's one of the reasons why I am frequently suggesting folks take another look at Gilroy if they haven't already. Sellers were getting $125,807 below expectations. We'll see another sort of interesting number for Gilroy coming up here next, but that alone indicates that Gilroy may be out of sync with reality in terms of what expected prices are. But when it comes down to actually accepting an offer and getting sold, we are seeing it happen in a way where folks are willing to take below expectations, right? So that's another important insight as a buyer into understanding the psychology of what you're dealing with in the market where you're trying to purchase. All right, next, let's take a look at percent over under asking price. This is an interesting one because this really just represents how much over asking price are people getting, right? And we've seen crazy numbers. We've seen in the past, there have been months where people were getting 10%, 11%, 12% over asking price. And what's also interesting is when we look at this, when we just look over our shoulder, if we compare this to past years, like what was the trend between September and October with this number, this completely does a 180 from the historical trend for this particular number. So in Santa Clara County, last year at this time, people were getting about 4% above asking price, or 104% of asking price. This year, in October of 2024, they're getting 105.2, or 5.2% over asking price, which is overall a 1.2% delta change between those two numbers. In San Jose, it was only a 0.5% change, 104.2 from last year, 104.7 this year, so 4.7% above asking price in San Jose. In Morgan Hill, last year we were getting below asking price to the tune of 98.6% of asking price, getting 100% of asking price on average in Morgan Hill, which is a 1.4% change from the previous year. Gilroy, only community where it's down, 102.3 last year, 101.1 this year. So they got 1.1% over asking price. That's a 1.2% delta from the same time last year. And again, one of the only places where it actually went down. And again, when we look at the numbers as they relate to past months, not just year over year, you're going to see where that interesting trend change is happening. Next, let's take a look at days on market. And we can see that we've got almost across the board increases with the exception of Morgan Hill. Santa Clara County, 19 days last year, 21 days this year for an 11% increase. 17 days last year in San Jose and 19 days in 2024 in October for a 12% increase. Morgan Hill down 6%, 32 days last year, 30 days this year. In Gilroy, 17 days last year, 25 days this year for a 47% increase. Now, if you'll excuse me just for a second here, I'm going to take a quick break, but I will be right back to finish up these numbers, so don't go away. Okay, sorry about that. Had to take a quick break there. And as I said, we just wrapped up days on market. So let's go ahead now and take a look at sort of looking over our shoulder at some of these numbers. We're going to combine total active listings, new listings, homes sold, and pending. First, let's look at total active listings. And what we're going to do here is this is, again, just over time. And we're going to see where we are today on trends versus the trends from past years. And the red lines represent Octobers of past years. So we can see that between September and October, dramatic drop in the total number of listings, whereas it's a little bit contradictory. So last year between September and October, we saw flat performance from September to October in terms of total inventory. But we did see a dramatic decline in inventory right after October, which is pretty normal. Normally in November, we see people who decide they want to take their homes off the market because they don't want to deal with folks coming through the house during the holiday season when they perhaps have guests over, or they're looking at just having the home be set up for Thanksgiving and Christmas. But also because of any weather that comes along, they're not interested in having people trooping and stomping through the house with wet and muddy shoes. So it's not unusual to see that as what happens immediately after October. And we can see them both in October of 2022 and October of 2023, the following months. We saw those drops where they bottomed out in December. All very normal. We had that very weird 2022 where interest rates went crazy, which is probably one reason why we saw a little bit more of a dramatic drop between September and October in terms of inventory. But we usually see a drop in inventory in October. Just a very weird peak in September that's a little bizarre because we don't tend to see that in any other previous years. So definitely 2024 has turned out to be a very weird year, and we're going to see why it's been even more weird here in a second. Next, we take a look at new listings. Pretty big drop in new listings. Same thing happened last year, and same thing happened in 2022. So all very typical for this time of year as we enter into winter, again into November and December. In October, we'll frequently see the beginning of that. Next, total number of homes sold. In 2022, we saw a drop. In 2023, we saw an increase. And in 2024, we saw an increase, an even more dramatic increase than we saw in 2023. So I'm always a little bit fascinated by increases in listings in October. I do not see October as a premium time to list your home. In fact, in my community, kind of inexplicably, there was a home that was on coming soon for 2 months that went live in October, and that made no sense to me at all. Maybe they just weren't ready, but the likelihood of you getting your price in August is much better than it is in October, although we did see good performance in terms of what folks were getting, but not in Morgan Hill in October. If you're looking to sell, and again, this is going to depend on your local market, but by and large, as a general rule that tends to be correct most of the time, if you're looking at selling your home and you're going to go on the market in October, stop and think about that a little bit more. Think about things you could do, low cost, high impact things you could do, like painting is one of those things that's low cost, high impact on a home that you could do where you could then put the home on the market in January or February. Your home will be 3 months old on the market once you hit January and February. And the odds of you getting your asking price in January and February is going to be much higher during those months than it is in October. So I'm familiar with the agent that this person is listed with, and I'm not horribly surprised that this is happening on sort of what I wouldn't consider optimal timing for the seller, unless there's something else going on. Perhaps there are personal reasons, other things have happened that simply make it mandatory that it happens in October. But for you, if you're a homeowner, definitely think through this and try to understand when the peak is in terms of how much you're likely to get for your home, because October isn't it, just historically. Okay, so what else do we have? And then we have pending next. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on with pending. So pretty big jump in pending. And what's interesting is pendings went down the 2 previous years. You can see that in 2023 and 2024, 2023 and 2022, between September and October, we see a decrease in pendings. Interesting increase in pendings, which implies that we're going to see more homes getting sold in November than is historically normal. Now, what's interesting about this is if we had the numbers going back another 2 years when things were really going nuts, like just before the interest rate jump, we saw this sort of thing happening where where things were just jumping in terms of sales in the winter months. We had a few years in a row where November and December ended up being big sales months. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes from here. And if we don't see a big increase, if we don't see an increase in sales on par with the pendings, I'm going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive and figure out what caused that. Was it because right now we have interesting interest rates going on? We've got under 7% in Morgan Hill and Santa Clara County broadly. So it'll be interesting to see what's happened there. There's nothing happening right now in terms of crazy interest rate stuff that I think would fuel a big failure of loans as they move into November, but we'll see how that goes. So where do I think things are going to go from here? Well, again, we've bucked a couple of trends from past years just with what we're seeing here. My guess is that total active listings and new listings will continue to drop as in previous years, as we've seen before. The historical data would tend to bear that out. But in terms of with a softening perhaps in the total active listings, simply because we're seeing a big jump in home sales. We saw a jump last year, but we didn't see a jump the year before that. If we continue to see sales increasing, well, then that would tend to eat away at total active listings. And we've already seen pending sales. So if we continue to see a rise in pending sales, obviously that indicates a rise in future sales. So we may see another crazy year where right up to the end of the year, we see increasing sales. Now, what's interesting about this is one of the things that has fueled this in past years are two things, which isn't being reflected really in what the total active listings are, since those are going down, right? One, a higher number of sellers who will not take their home off of the market for the holiday season because they can't afford to. They have to get their home sold, so they don't have the flexibility to pull their home off of the market. As a strategy, if you're someone trying to get your home sold right now and you've been on the market for a long time, I would suggest, if you can do it, take your home off the market, be off the market for 90 days, and then list it. And then it'll show up as a brand new listing. You won't, obviously people can look at the history and see that you had it listed earlier in the year. But in terms of the MLS and how much it pops up at the top of people's lists, that's a benefit. So consider that if you've had some trouble selling, and come back on the market at a slightly lower price. You'll get better attention, and I think you'll really raise the probability that you might get a multiple offer scenario where you end up getting what you were originally asking for it, but only after it got bid up to that point. So in terms of where we're going to go in sales, given what we're seeing, my anticipation for next month is we see a continuing market-defying increase in total number of homes sold. So declines in total active listings and new listings, increase in sales. Next, average list price versus sales price. We've done another. Whoops! I hit my button too many times. Come on, baby. There we go. All right. So we've done another flip. So one thing I've told you in the past is keep an eye out for situations where we see these numbers cross each other, right? So last month I told you, wow, look, interesting that in September we saw average list price higher than average sales price. And now we're seeing average sales price higher than average list price. If we look at past years, we can see that in October of 2023, the two numbers were almost in line with each other. But in 2022, original list price was quite a bit higher than actual sales price. So that is more normal. We tend to see the market performing less. I mean, if you just look at what average sales price does, when you get into winter, it tends to go down and bob around a little bit, right? You can see here from October, November, December, January, February, March is when it starts going back up. Interesting with that little uptick in January, though. That is a normal thing now. It didn't used to be, but it's a normal thing now. You can see it also happened in January of 24. And folks just jump back into the new year and start thinking new house. So we start to see that sales prices go up as competition gets a little bit more stiff. But you can see that this is usually the down point where we see a slope that goes up, peaking in June. And we'll see here in June, it's almost June. It was May last year. It was May in 2024 in terms of where the peak was for average sales price. But April and May and June are really your sweet spots in terms of where you're going to tend to get your highest sales price. Next, let's see. This is the percent of asking price over time, and it's an idea to get the trend. And if you look at October, you can see here's October of last year of 2023. Here's where we're up. But if you look at past years, look at that. That's not what normally happens. Usually in September, we peak in and around the summer months here. And this particular year, we peaked in July of 2023. And then it tends to bounce around a little bit, but starts to go down once we hit October, bottoming out in December, and then going back up in January. and then usually with a pretty big jump in the summer months again. And that's what happened last year. Not a big jump last year, but if we could go back and look at 2022, we would see that's what happened. But usually October is a decline on the way to the bottoming out in November or December. That's not what we saw. We saw a weird uptick in October, which implies, I mean, the number one implication of selling above asking price is multiple offers, right? Why would you sell for above asking price unless there were multiple people bidding on your house? So clearly that's what we've been seeing in October. More buyers came out. It would be logical to assume that some of that relates to lower interest rates, but interest rates weren't dramatically lower in October. But we'll see. We'll see what goes on. We're going to look at interest rates here in a second. But this was not what I expected. When I did my prediction last month, I predicted this to continue to go down. So there you go. Next is days on market. Again, just an opportunity to see the trend. We can see we're down from September. If we look at past Octobers, we can see it's usually pretty flat, right? I mean, at least the trend line doesn't have a peak in it anywhere, either a valley or a peak. In October of 2022, it was kind of the middle of an upward trend as we went into winter. In 2023, same thing, relatively flat, and then an uptick as we head further into winter. And one thing I like to comment when people say, well, gosh, you talk about the activity in January. Why is the days on market so much higher in January? That's because properties that have been staying on the market longer are selling off, right? So when you get that first boost of increased sales, you tend to see an increase in days on market because you're selling homes that have been on the market longer, that were languishing sort of on the market during those winter months. That's why that increases. It's not a statement of what's happening in that month. It's a statement of how much sales have dug into the longer lasting inventory, the inventory that didn't sell as quickly as other properties. So that's why that number goes up. And then as you sell off some of those homes that have been on the market longer, then that's when you see the drop in total days in market. So you just normally don't expect to see a U-turn like this. You expect to see a relatively gradual continuation of what you got in September or August. And in this case, we did not get that. We got a dramatic drop. So a lot of homes that hadn't been on the market very long compared to the last month ended up getting sold. Next, this is a rundown of how many homes have had price reductions. And given everything that we've already talked about, I think this is super interesting. So in Santa Clara County last month, we had 23% of homes had a price reduction sometime in the month of October. September. In October, that number went up to 26%, which is a 77% increase from the same time last year. So far more properties in October in the county had a price reduction than they did this year, right? A lot of that could probably explain, it doesn't really explain it. I mean, because we have so many homes that are still selling for above asking price. But I think one thing that you can take from this is there is still room to find properties where you can make an offer below asking price. Not every home is selling at 5% over asking price. So just be aware of that. And if you're working with a knowledgeable real estate agent, they're going to be able to crack the numbers for the local market that you're looking at when you're doing a home. And that's something else I encourage you to always ask for as a buyer. Have that agent do a market analysis of the home that you're looking to buy as if they were going to list it. What should that be listed for? What should it be selling for, right? Based on the numbers on the day you're making that offer. Because if that home's been on the market for 30 days, maybe the market's changed dramatically. And so that agent who has the listing maybe hasn't digested those numbers or shared them with the owner. But that's just something I run through every time whenever I'm making an offer on a property. I do a market analysis based on today's numbers, particularly in a market that's declining. That just makes sense, right? And it also gives you an opportunity to present data on, hey, here's our offer, but here's data that informs it. It's not just how we feel about it. This is what the market indicates our offer should be at. San Jose, 22%. Last month, so 22% of homes in September had a price reduction, 24% in October, which is a 68% increase from the same time last year. So in October of last year, it was 68% less. Morgan Hill, 32% last month in September. In October, it was 36%. A 200, that's not a typo. I double checked. It's a 233% increase from last year. So a huge uptick of price reductions in Morgan Hill compared to last year. And this is interesting. Now, remember, this doesn't reflect at all the amount of the reduction, just did the house have a reduction? But there are tons of homes that were priced at the higher price point, so above 1.3 to 1.4. In Morgan Hill, one of those weird lines in the sand as it relates to price, when you're looking at sales activity, is about 1.3 million. And I noticed an awful lot of homes had price reductions that were in that upper echelon number as you got closer to 2 million. There's a lot less activity that happens at the above 1.3 million point than below the 1.3 million point in terms of buyer interest, which is obvious. The motivation there is folks wanting to pay less for a house, but it's also something that's not always been true for Morgan Hill. We've actually seen periods of time where that over 1.3 million threshold had more sales than the homes below it. So I think it's an interesting reflection of where the market is today. In Gilroy, 30% last month of September. In October, it was 22%. So actually fewer homes, right? So this is one of the few areas where in Gilroy, they needed to have fewer price reductions, which says more about how rationally sellers have been pricing their homes in Gilroy. But it is still a 67% increase from last year in terms of how many homes are having price reductions in the month of October. So that's all super interesting stuff in terms of where we're at, and also complete changes from the same time last year, or complete changes from past periods in previous years relating to the numbers we've covered so far. Some very interesting deviations in 180s from what is normal. So what do I think about the market in general in Santa Clara County? I think, again, deals can be found. A whole lot of it is gonna rely on you having the market knowledge that you need to make good decisions on where your offer should be, and knowing when not to offer over asking price, right? There are going to be plenty of opportunities. I was working with some folks just a year and a half ago where, the process of making an offer and being declined can take its toll. And I try to calibrate myself to my buyers. I say, hey, if you guys just want this process to be over as quickly as possible, and you don't need to focus as much on squeezing every penny out of the experience, just let me know, and I'll just offer my opinion. But I feel like I saved them from a couple of really bad purchases where they were saying that, well, we'll offer $70,000 over asking price so we get this, and I said, I understand that, and in some markets I would encourage it. I wouldn't encourage it in this market. I think these folks are completely out of whack. Interesting way that went. We were being told there were multiple offers, and we were being told to come back with highest and best. We did not resubmit a highest and best offer, and lo and behold, our original offer got accepted. So that ended up working out well for them, and kind of reveals an interesting thing that happens every now and again in real estate, where there may not be as many multiple offers as you think there are, as far as what you're being told by the listing agent. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at other stuff. Now, that's not the way it's supposed to be. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them now as we kind of hit this point of the live chat. I don't see any questions. I see we've had a few people poke in. One person shared the live chat. Thank you very much. The only comments so far are my automated comments that kind of pop in here every once in a while. But I'd love to hear from someone if you've got any questions. Now, as always, this is the personal plug part of the show. I apologize. If you're interested in getting a free online evaluation of your property value, please feel free to use this tool. This is right on the front page of my website, soldbyrobert.com. Just start entering your address. At some point, it'll populate below it with your address, and you can just select that, and it'll immediately tell you what the home is worth, or what the online estimate is. The reason I use this tool, for those of you who've been listening to me for a long time, who've been following my podcasts and other things that I get up to, you know that every year I review my technology to see who's giving the best data. Zillow doesn't tend to be awesome. Trulia doesn't tend to be awesome. They're both the same company. Redfin is frequently overpricing in terms of their estimates, but it depends. It just depends on their data. I have found this data to be much closer to accurate than those other tools. So I've settled on this one for now. Again, I'll do a review at the end of this year in December and January and see if there's a better tool out there. But for right now, this is not only the best tool because it's the best tool because of the price, but it's also because of this. If you look at the other things it offers, it has a variety of tools. So it's going to give you the home value estimator. So it'll look like this. This is what you'll see immediately. You don't have to give me your email address. You don't have to give me anything, but it'll give you this. But if you want more, if you want to get the home equity tool that lets you get an idea of how much equity you have, how to tap into that equity, and again, this is all linked not only to this data, but it's linked to a local lender. So these are real numbers, and this local lender can help you take the next step and accomplish any of these tasks. Home purchase options are shown, and you can explore those. Refinance calculator, should you refinance given current situations? And again, this is all real data. So it's going to be very reliable, and then you'll be able to reach out to a local lender that I've partnered with who can help you explore these options. And again, this is very upfront. If this was a green number and these were green check marks instead of X's, then it would make sense for you to refinance. But this is saying it makes no sense for you to refinance right now. And then your mortgage summary, where you're at, how much is going towards interest, and it lets you figure out how much, if you paid more, how much would you save? This is other options. This is things influencing your market right now. Thinking of selling, you have 3 strong selling signals. You might have up to 1.4 million in purchasing power based on your current equity in your home. You could use about 144K of equity to feel more ready for a storm. Net worth of home. With tools, change these numbers. That looks right. If you feel like you need to change these, you can. And then the home renting tool, where you can figure out what would make sense. Would I be positive cash flow, monthly revenue, nightly rate, number of nights on average? And these are all tools that you will get for free if you decide to sign up to get the regular monthly updates. So I like to share that. I think it's the best tool I've seen out there. And if you feel like it's for you, great. It's offered totally free. Okay, next. This is where we are on mortgage rates. You can see that as of today, we're talking 7.02 nationally, right? But nationally isn't local. But this is just to give you a history of where interest rates have gone, where we're basically a whole point higher than we were in September of 2024. But if we go ahead and we look, now this is the new tool I'm using to search for. It's not the only tool. I usually, if I'm actually searching for a mortgage, I'll use several tools because it really depends on who these people are partnered with. But this one caught my eye because of a couple of things. One, it's giving me options I don't see on other tools, which is great. But as you can see, we're in Morgan Hill. If we were to spend $1,630,000 in Morgan Hill, and these rates are a representation of what you get anywhere in Santa Clara County, really. You can see the APR is 6.43, 6.827, so lower than the national average. But of course, there's points. You're going to see points for both of these for a 30-year mortgage. What's interesting here, and something I want you to use if you're somebody who's considering buying a second home or a home you're going to use as a rental, you can get an idea of how much more it's going to cost you. And right now, it's not that bad. So 6.433 versus 6.827. If you were going to get a secondary home or a vacation home, it jumps up to 6.699 and 7.083. So not a huge jump. But if you're going to do a rental, only one at 7.6. So about a full point higher for a straight up rental. Now, here's what's great about this. If you're someone who wants to get into investing, and you find yourself in a position where you can purchase that first property, buy it as a secondary home, plan ahead on when weeks you want to be in the home, when you're going to vacation there. And then when you're not there, rent it out as a short-term rental because you're going to get a much preferred rate. And once you've done that for a year or two, you could change over to renting it full time. And you're not violating, you're not committing fraud. because you've held the home for longer than a year. But here's what I think you're going to find. I think what you're going to find is you make way more money doing short-term rentals and enjoying the property yourself as a vacation property than what you'll make as a rental. Now, you can completely offload managing this property, scheduling people, cleaning it, all of that stuff to a property management firm that's probably going to charge you. I think the best I've ever seen was 10%, and the worst I've ever seen was 50% in Hawaii. But 20% seems to be a pretty mainstream number that I see. But this could be a great way for you to cover those costs and still take advantage of the property. It's something I'm considering doing. I'm thinking my next purchase is going to be a home that falls into this category where I'm going to spend a week or 2 weeks out of each month in the property. And when I'm not there, I'll be renting it as a vacation rental with the intent of it really just covering the costs. And maybe I'll have a month when I'm not there at all, which would then obviously be way into positive cash flow. But I think it's a great way to go. And this is one of the few tools that gives you this option to explore this. The other tool that I've been using and showing here on this show doesn't have that option. So that's one reason why I'm sharing that with you this time. Now, if we get into some of the news items that have been happening, Federal Reserve cuts rates again. This is from November 8th. They cut it a half a point or 50 basis points. Why they don't just say a half a point, I don't know. But anyway, the Fed announced on November 7th it was dropping rates by 25% so they dropped it 25 basis points following the 50 basis points in September. Investors might hope that with inflation under control, another rate cut could signal the start of the more affordable housing market. However, it's not that simple. Yeah, and why is that? Because there is no direct link between this number and your lending rate, what you're going to see from a lender. It's more linked with 10-year treasuries, and there's a lot more psychology based on it. For those of you who are listeners to the podcast, and again, I get messages from the folks who listen to the podcast that I need to do one. It's been months since I've done a podcast. I promise I am going to do one. I've been kind of taking a break this year, but I promise I will get back in the saddle. That is part of the plan. That even with nothing else changing, right? With 10-year treasury staying relatively stable and with the prime rate staying where it is for an extended period of time, you can still see lending rates take a jump. There is so much more psychology in it and people freaking out for weird reasons, which is one reason why you normally don't want to lock in a lending rate like just before a big election like we just had, right? Because there is uncertainty. Anytime there is uncertainty in the mix, they don't like that. So interest rates tend to go up. We'll see what happens with interest rates post-election. It's been a week since the election. Interest rates, as we can see here, if we go back to this, it's, let's see, what was the date on that? November 8th was Friday. They took a big dump, right? So that's the 6th. And then on the 7th, they went down and then they went back up again. So we achieved lower uncertainty after the election, whether and regardless of what your political bent is, right? Whoever you voted for, doesn't matter. Uncertainty is simply we don't know who's going to be president, right? So then it dropped, then it rebounded a bit, and it's sort of taken a little bit of a rebound, a little bit of an uptick here. And who knows what that could be. More levels of uncertainty are who is going to get appointed to lead certain institutions that may affect financial stuff. This could be a reflection of those concerns. So, it's far more of what are people thinking often than just what numbers are doing. So that's just something to keep in mind. Next, Realtor.com reports inventory up 26.1%. We know that inventory was up in Santa Clara County 18%. So broadly across the country, inventory is up more than here, which doesn't surprise me. And that's something else. Like if you're interested in investing and you've sort of figured out your radius of how far you're willing to go as an investor, if you want to do right in your own town, keep track of these things on Zillow and Trulia and Redfin, wherever your favorite site is. Realtor.com is a good one. And just keep a search running where you see what was happening with homes. You're going to get email alerts when price drops happen. And over the last 6 months, I have seen one price increase versus every other notification being a price reduction. And the price increase was unexplainable. This is one I saw in Carson City where a home got increased in price from $425,000 to $499,000 with absolutely no logical reason why that happened. And it won't sell at that price. Because prices are being dropped. And I'm seeing the same thing in Phoenix. I'm seeing the same thing. Austin is another one where not only are home prices dropping, but rents are dropping dramatically. That doesn't spell stay away from markets. That spells take a closer look at markets and pick your moment and buy that investment property. I think we're seeing a time when it could be a potentially very interesting opportunity for folks interested in those markets. Now, and the other thing is do the full math, right? One thing people forget to do. One reason why California stays popular is because of appreciation. Some folks are willing to take only a 5%, 4% cash return on investment on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis, simply because they know that the rate of appreciation is much higher, right? As we look at these numbers of homes where the sales prices are up, 9%, 4.7, 4.3, 3.3. Those are big numbers. In some of these other markets, you can't even really count on much appreciation. There are some markets where it's very flat, and maybe it's a 1% increase, or maybe it's the same price when you bought it. So you need to focus on where you're doing your cash taking, right? You shouldn't invest in a home if you're only going to make 5%. You'd make 5% or more investing in an index fund, right? So the goal here should be to beat that, which in my mind is greater than 10 to 12%. You want to make more than 10 to 12%. But again, that's all math and stuff that you can figure out. Next, mortgage rates dropped slightly to 6.78, remaining higher than expected. This was the 14th, and we've already kind of looked at these numbers. Now we are at the Reventure app, and this is one I like. This is one I was hoping I could use to answer any specific questions folks have. Now, why is this awesome? Well, because it's not just... All right, thank you. This is the whole country. So if you're someone who's interested in other areas... and I surf pretty much this whole area here. But in terms of what's going on with Morgan Hill, if we look at monthly buy versus rent differential, we saw a bit of a decrease. We were just talking about how rents are down in Austin. In fact, let's look at that. Let's go with the Metro. Ooh, what the heck? Oh, okay, that's a big area. Let's just see what's going on with rents. Look at that drop. Wow. Buy versus rent differential, big drop. Let's look at the monthly. Yeah, so it's kind of doing the downward trend thing. It's interesting it's popped up just a little bit in October, but still an interesting number. If we go back to Morgan Hill, typical house payment. What? The typical house payment is not $101,000. Sorry. Let's see here. Buy versus rent differential. What else have we got? Salary to afford the house. This is something I posted on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. I mean, these are the kinds of numbers that I think are nuts. We've kind of peaked out here, just a dramatic increase that sort of hit a peak in 2022, and then we hit an all-time peak in October of 2023, so just a year ago, where the salary is insane, $336,000 to afford a home. Obviously, depending on, this is probably assuming how much household income needed to confirmed by a house in the area. Calculation assumes household spends 30% of their gross income on their mortgage, tax, and insurance. Let's see. And this is one that's interesting, and I'm trying to get a handle on it. This would be not overvalued. We've been sort of trending down into, but suddenly took a change in June of last year and saw things going back here into overvalued. Very interesting that we saw back in 2020 really close to not being overvalued and then undervalued from 2008 to 2014. Such a sweet spot in here. I helped so many folks become investors during this time, and I wish I had acquired more property during this time. I think anybody who does this knows that was just an amazing time, and everybody should be jumping in and buying something. And I ended up helping people do it more than I ended up helping myself. But let's see. And here, percent crash from 2007, 2012, down 50.3%, down 39. Change from June 2022, down 2%, which was a peak. So 2022 was a peak. Up 1.4%, down 0.7, up 4.9, up 6 point, up 1.8. Gilroy, a complete wash from 2022. But anyway, so there's no questions coming in, so I guess we can just call it there. We've actually just hit it. It's just hit 11 o'clock, which is our usual end time. But again, if you ever have any questions for me, or you would like to discuss your personal situation, whether you're buying or selling, I'm happy to help you achieve those goals. The market's very crazy right now, particularly for buyers, because in 2024 we had the way buyers agents gets paid has completely changed, and there are definitely some things that buyers need to watch out for with that new reality. So I'll be happy to explain those to you. Again, I truly appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you all next time for the Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat.